Okay. Well, welcome everybody to our webinar for January 2022. This is the second webinar that we have done as part of our How They Did It series. We're calling this one Critical Workflows Automated. And the How They Did It series is really intended to be a showcase because over the course of the time that Macedon has been in business over the last 12 or so years and all of the projects that we have done, we've automated a ton of different types of workflows over that time period and really customized for whatever the use case may be. And so we wanted to go through and do a showcase of some of the different success stories that we have had. And with that in mind, very excited to welcome Jeff Phelan with us. And Jeff, would you mind introducing yourself really quick?
Sure, thanks, Colin. My name is Jeff Phelan. I've been in the mortgage real estate industry for the past 35 years. I've held positions in the executive management position at mortgage companies to running operations. And my most fulfilling part was being a top sales producer at two of the largest mortgage companies nationwide. Currently, I'm here at Planet Home Lending. I run one of the 6 divisions we have. We have 6 different business channels. I run the business channel of fix and flip lending, and Planet Home Lending is a nationwide mortgage lender. We do about $3 billion a month in business. We currently service $50 billion a month in loan servicing, mortgage loan servicing. That represents about 100 to 175 borrowers, 175,000 borrowers. And we were in desperate need of automation for all the different business channels.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And again, just to give us a little bit of introduction about Macedon Technologies and just to kind of give context about why we're doing this kind of a webinar. So Macedon, we've been in business for a little over 12 years. And over that time, we have had a ton of different types of engagements and seen a lot of different types of industries. I'll introduce myself really quick. My name is Colin Schoenfelder. I am the Director of Technology with Macedon Technologies. So really have seen a lot of different types of projects and a lot of different types of implementations. I'm joined by Sik Kim, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sik Kim, and I was a project lead that worked with Jeff and his team at Planet. I've been at Macedon for around 7 years now, and as the lead, my role was basically to be the Sherpa to both our development team and the Planet team and kind of guide us all to the same vision and product. So I'm really excited to be here. My first time doing a webinar, so I'll try not to steal too much of the limelight from Jeff.
Great. And the format of this is really, we're just going to kind of go and have open discussion. I've prepared a couple of questions that we're going to go through, Jeff through the time. And then also, if anybody has any questions through the webinar, we have a little questions panel that you can ask them in. I'll do my best to try and triage, and if anything comes up during the webinar that is relevant for that moment, I can kind of work and ask that question. Otherwise, we do have some time at the end in order to address it. But why don't we start out with, really kind of coming back to that, the very vast array of the different types of projects that we can build and solutions that we can build. Can we start just by you giving a little bit of an explanation of the kinds of business that you are trying to automate and just sort of a little bit about the problems that you were having beforehand?
Okay. So I started here in January of 2018, 4 years ago, actually this month. And my predecessor, he was doing about $2 million in funded loan volume and very locally concentrated. So I wanted to expand this geographically as well as volume-wise. And you can't run a profitable business on a spreadsheet, which is how my predecessor ran it. And coming from a mortgage banking background, I knew I needed to have some kind of LOS or loan operating system that afforded me the ability to make things scalable and have the right reporting and be able to handle large volume. And I went on a search for a company for that and that need. So I did find somebody, and they were very small, and I signed up with them. I customized their fields a little bit for 3 months, got up and running with them. And after 3 months of operation, I get the dreaded email that they're out of business as of Friday. They went bankrupt and they cannot get any more funding. So my search was on for a new product.
Gotcha. And so as you were starting that process of looking for a new product, obviously you were using kind of a COTS solution that you had done some minor or off-the-shelf solution that you had done some minor customization to, but then you moved into something which was custom. Can you talk a little bit about how what that decision was like and why you started to consider go more of a custom solution and what your kind of vision when you were looking into something custom was.
Sure, fair enough. So I work for Planet Home Lending. That's our parent company. We have 1,200 employees throughout the country, 42 sales branches, 6 big operational centers. So you can imagine we have a huge IT infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
My IT team and chief credit officer came to me and said, why don't we do some demos and we'll get more information on the financial background of these companies in my space. And we did about 6 demos. And at the end of the day, we decided, I think it was my project manager that worked with me on this, said, why don't we build our own system? I found this company called Macedon and they can tweak a system and we can build our own. And we could probably have it built out in no time. And I think we did a couple of demos and conference calls with your team, and we made the decision to forge ahead and move forward. We signed a contract. And I think the biggest thing was our first week together, where we all sat in my conference room. We kind of came up with the vision, what my problems were and what we wanted to solve for and how we were going to go about doing it.
And that was, for you personally, that was your first, foray into trying to build out custom software. Is that correct? Or had you ever kind of been involved in that experience beforehand?
I've been involved in it to an extent when I ran operations in the mortgage banking world. There's a software called Encompass, there's Calyx Point, which are all loan operating systems that interface with credit reporting and appraisals and titles and all those other things. So I had some knowledge of it, but I never took on a project from ground up like we did with Macedon.
Yeah, and actually, Sick and I were the ones that were in that conference room with you, and definitely, going from that ground up process, there was a lot of, okay, let's talk through, what the current state is, and really try and figure out how to take that from the to be and identify the challenges, and then figure out exactly how we were going to get around them, and really make something that was streamlined. And on that note, I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about the existing process that you were doing, which was, very spreadsheet based? Can you talk a little bit about, what some of the big challenges that you were having with that process and really how that was bogging you down and kind of preventing you from hitting some of the big goals that you had?
Sure. So as you can imagine, manually trying to do things in this world today is, it's time consuming and it just leads to many errors. So we did everything on a spreadsheet. So from putting together the initial, we call it letter of intent or term sheet, was an Excel spreadsheet that we would manually input all the numbers based on looking at files. All the files came into my system through email. And, I was getting hundreds of emails a day with huge attachments, and half the times I were missing them. Sometimes they couldn't even get through because the file was too big. And then trying to track additional docs that came in after the first time, and then trying to track what was approved, what my appraisal department looked at. Did we run credit? Did we not run credit? It was, just to say a nightmare would be an understatement. We were doing 75 to 100 loans a month, all manual, tracking them on a spreadsheet. If it was cleared to close, if it was closed, how much money we sent. And it was an absolute nightmare.
And those sorts of things are also tend to be fraught with just, manual data entry issues, right? Like, I forgot to update a status when I was, intended to, or, I just entered something a little bit differently. And so can you talk a little bit about like the baseline that you were working on? Like what kind of metrics did you have for how long it would take to go through that process? And was that something that you were actively measuring through your current workflow?
We try to measure to the best of our ability. So my mornings would start early in the morning and I'd stay here late at night, just trying to update those spreadsheets and trying to make sure we answered all the emails. So an average loan would take probably 10 days to go from application to a closing, but there was so many different touch points, or as we call them, tasks in your system. There was so many different touch points, and who was responsible for each touch point. So you would have to make sure that they updated a spreadsheet for what they did on a daily basis. And then I had a master spreadsheet that kind of oversaw everybody's division, from appraisal review to credit review to underwriting to funding. And it was just too much manual copying and pasting of spreadsheets into one master spreadsheet. So what I was looking for was one portal, and we used a shared drive where everybody was dropping docs into a shared drive.
Mhm.
I wanted one portal, one system where there was a file flow and there was accountability if we entered into something, and if you answered yes, it opened up another box so we wouldn't make a mistake and close a loan without insurance or flood insurance, and
Yeah.
different things we learned by making human error mistakes running a loan, a company on a spreadsheet.
Gotcha. And so then, that's kind of the old system. Can you talk about what about the new system? After we kind of went through that whole process of, creating this whole, automated workflow, what did you get an addressing of all of those different issues? And can you talk a little bit about just sort of, that process versus the current state and, how far you've come, or like what the outcomes of that have been?
So again, I think the key for us was that week we sat in the room. I think we created 156 or 151 stories so that we could take a file from application through funding. And it was really fun to see all those things come to life. And I think the key was our commitment to keeping on timelines and getting things done. So today, my goal was to cut down on emails, cut down on phone calls, cut down on mistakes, and cut down on text messages and all those things. So did we accomplish that? Leaps and bounds. I hardly get any emails today, which is wonderful.
Mhm.
There's one portal. I can look at a loan. I click on one screen and it tells me I can look at who signed off on it, what day. It's digitally timestamped. I can see everything in a snapshot, and it's clean, it's easy, and it's the same for my customer experience. They can log in instead of asking me about one loan. If it's under one username, every loan that's associated with that username is there. The status of the loan is there, and it just makes for a ease of procurement and a friendly, good customer experience.
Yeah, for sure. And I can definitely relate with, trying to get everything away from email and into something which is systemized at this point, because this is the sort of a thing that we do all the time. Our goal is often to try and get things out of email so that that's almost an afterthought. Like all of the information can be centralized into one place so that I can go figure out what I have to do. And when I do have to take action, it's very easy for me to get all of the knowledge that I have to about that and from one centralized place. So that's great to hear. I'm glad that you don't have to sift through all of the emails anymore.
Right.
And it sounds like also, this was something which had a relatively quick timeline, right? Like your old system was something that was, sunset very quickly. What kind of timelines did you have in mind for when you first, started engaging with trying to find a solution until when you actually needed something, live in production and having users in it?
Oh, I think they turned us off in February, and we did, I think, 7 demos with different companies that, had some form of LOS system that was plug and play. You popped it in, but it was not customized. So I needed something quickly. We had you guys in, I think it was middle of March. So within a week's time, I went through all the demos. I hired you, and we had you guys here in March. And I think we rolled out our first stage or phase 1, either by the end of April or beginning of May, if memory serves me correctly.
Yeah, I think we actually had 2 phases. We did like a quick MVP after 6 weeks, and then another one after 10 weeks.
Right. And then we did ongoing cleanup afterwards on our backlog and some of my bigger lifts of my wish list items. Right.
And remind me, actually, what was the application called internally, or what is the name of it?
We call it Appian.
Does the individual workflow have like kind of a name to it? Earlier, you mentioned like a different type of system, like the loan origination.
LOS. Yeah, it's LOS. So we just call it Appian here. It's PRC's Appian product. It's really, it's just everything is there. It captures everything. I can run reports. My loan production from originations is separate. And then I have my servicing, because we're a bank, so we keep the service. Even after the loan closes, it's still with me until the loan pays off. So we have a front end system, and we coordinated a huge back end system, which was one of the big benefits that we didn't even realize, was that there's 150 to 160 data points that my servicing people were manually inputting into the system because I worked off of a spreadsheet, and
Mhm.
they gave me those 150 or 160 data points, and Sick and I made sure as we programmed the system, we were capturing those data points upstream so they could flow downstream. And now that 2 hours of time for each file is literally 2 minutes of QC. Because at the end of the night, whatever's in a certain task that we
Mhm.
complete automatically uploads into that system with all those data points. They QC it to make sure everything uploaded correctly. And I've cut the time from literally 2 hours to 1 to 2 minutes of QC time. So I
Right.
basically saved myself hiring another person to handle the job.
Right. And then as part of that, Sick, you mentioned, it was rolled out in 2 phases and on that kind of timeline system. So it sounds like you really embraced, sort of the agile process and that agile methodology of sort of going through in an iterative way and, kind of looking at things and then figuring out what the next highest priorities were, tackling that next and iterating through that. Was that your first interaction with using an agile process before, or is that something that you had interacted with before?
Never used it before. And I think one of the keys is that I run the division from soup to nuts. So I'm in charge of marketing, servicing, originations, fulfillment, and servicing. And I was able to make decisions. I didn't have to go to the head of another department to get their okay to do it. And we just made decisions. Sick and I would have every morning we had our 10:30 scrub meeting, I think, to talk about the day before and whatever we needed to make changes to. And we were all committed to those timeframes, and that communication and decision-making process really pushed the process along, I think.
Yeah, I was definitely going to follow up, ask about just that timeline is very impressive. I think you said 6 weeks, or was it 6 weeks to the first release and
For
then
our
10
first
weeks?
sprint, we did 6 weeks. So we had nothing to being able to put an application in and take that data and actually convert it to an application on the back end.
Yeah. And so it sounds like, definitely dedication from, yourself and making sure that this project was a priority was a big influence. But were there any other things that you think were really allowed you to be successful in that quick of a timeline? Like what kinds of things did you need to convey as an organization and trying to, incite that kind of change? What kinds of things were you focused on in order to make sure that you could hit that kind of a milestone?
Well, the business line was very important to Planet, still is. And I had, being in upper management, I had the commitment from the rest of the senior management to handle dealing with the heads of the legal department, the heads of the servicing department to get the information that I needed to provide to Sick and Macedon so that we can fill those 150 data points because I didn't know what they were.
Mhm.
And it was just a cooperation of the other department heads and then getting that information over to Macedon and Sick was very good at, converting it into the back end programming so that it became my dream became my reality.
Yeah, great. And so, you obviously, you had this big rollout of this whole new systems to everybody on your team. How did your team respond to, actually starting to work with the application that you were building out? Obviously you would have had to have gone through just some, change management in terms of we're not using these spreadsheets anymore. We're using this application now. How did folks respond to that process? And did you have like a lot of feedback that they were giving through that whole rollout?
Well, again, my team that worked with me directly embraced it because they had no other choice. But it also made our jobs easier.
Right.
And once they realized that it made their job easier, they embraced it. And then with each division, so when we're ordering money for a closing, so my warehouse or my finance department, there was a little bit of hesitation because they're so busy and they didn't want to learn something new. And, once servicing saw that they went from 2 hours to 2 minutes, they really embraced it and got on board with giving me suggestions of what we could do to improve it or make it even better and more robust.
Mhm.
So, I think we probably affected 6 different departments, and legal, obviously, it was a big department that had to make sure we have our disclosures correctly, our e-signatures, security. So my IT department was making sure we had our security because of the information we have with borrowers, credit and all that information, social security numbers. So I got the cooperation of all those departments, and they all embraced it because they saw it was making our jobs easier. And then at the end of the day, the fun part of the project was Sick and I created all the reports that I need to do commissions, to run, different reports for audits and accounting and different things like that. And everybody got to see how it made us more efficient, and they started to embrace it a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that is for sure how a lot of our projects end up working out. We'll start with one business unit, and then as soon as one or two users from a business unit either go over to a different part of the organization, or, we include somebody and they immediately see the impact that it's able to have, it tends to sprawl out. And you really get a lot of magnified value over time with that process. Let's start with this, move over to another somewhat related, workflow or application, kind of bring that in so that you have a ton of, shared information between them, and the lift that it takes to bring in, more and more parts of the organization gets smaller and smaller over time, because of the fact that you already have a lot of the data in the system, you already have a lot of the integrations, users are already, familiar with a lot of the interfaces and how to interact with things. So yeah, for sure. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but this was not the first time that Appian was actually at Planner. And I think that your organization was a result of a somewhat similar process.
Well, I think what happened was, when I was out looking for a solution, Appian had just started up in my servicing department in Connecticut, a different office, different state. And I finished my project from beginning to end, which was a much larger project, and they were still in phase one. And I think it had a lot to do with having a great project manager in Sick and my commitment to getting this done. So we wound up finishing up the Connecticut project. I think Sick wound up taking it over. And then about a year and a half ago, IT came to me, and there was another project that we needed. And they started telling me about the project. They said, why don't we use Macedon? I think they would be perfect. And I think we did a third project to another division with you guys. And that was a big project as well, if memory serves me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely good to hear. And so kind of out of those outcomes, was there anything in, getting to customize your workflow and just kind of have a lot of automation to things? Was there anything which was an unexpected outcome that you weren't originally planning as something which was going to be, a nice to have that, came from, working with a system like that?
Actually, yes. So going from a manual system, we're in banking and a lending. So we have lots of audits and different things. And we have internal audits so we can make sure that when we're answering questions to regulators, we have these internal audits. And one of the wonderful things and big extra that came out of it was a lot of the internal audit deficiencies I had by running the company manually were corrected because we had digital timestamps on who did what. We had all the reporting, and we had all different back-end things where it just solved probably 50% of my internal audit write-ups from the year before. On top of that, I wound up making it where we have an e-folder where all the documents are stored in one place instead of on everybody's different emails or a shared drive. And that another benefit we did was we have again at night, it automatically uploads to a imaging system so that I have a backup to the entire system and every image or document that was involved in it. And that was a seamless click of a button, and it did it again. I didn't have to hire another staff to just image documents, which we had a position for. So I think those were two of the major things that really, were a blessing to me that I didn't even think of when I was building the front end system.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's see, the final question that I want to, so you mentioned some other workflows that, you had created after you had worked on this one that were for different business units or totally different organizations. But, Appian is definitely something which is built to be able to change, over time. Have you experienced any of that? Have you gone through and made modifications or updates to the application after the initial couple of phases? Yes. And kind of how did you approach that, management process?
So absolutely, yes. So, with this business, the mortgage lending business, things are evolving daily, feels like, and we add new products. So when we initially started, we only had the I run a fix and flip division, which is, if you've watched HGTV, we lend the people buying those houses that are distressed the money to fix them, and then they sell them and pay me back.
Mhm.
So that was our one main product that we built the system for originally, and now I'm doing longer term products like ground up construction and long term rentals, and I had to build in different product lines. So we used the initial benchmark of the fix and flip, and we used a lot of that programming, and we created tabs for fix and flip, rental, ground up construction, and we keep adding on to it. So
Okay.
we've done
Great.
probably 2 or 3 different major modifications since the initial inception of the Appian launch.
Nice. And what was your approach there? Like you mentioned that you have a large, IT organization. What's your approach to trying to handle that process? Like, do you have internal IT resources which, start to do any of like the maintenance or, supporting activities? At what point do you kind of come over to, Macedon to help you out, or how does that work?
I deal directly with you guys. I have a project manager, but I don't even think they've looked at my project. Each division assigned, IT people that we're supposed to go to if we have issues with our servers and different things. But for this particular project, this was my pet project. It was my baby from the beginning. And, we have such a great relationship and rapport with our ongoing, updates, whether they're daily or weekly, whatever we need. And we just deal with you directly, and our IT kind of I give them the update so they have it in their log. But
Mhm.
I march to a beat of a different drum than the rest of the organization.
I mean, you have to be able to keep that, that speed for delivery up.
Yes, so control.
Well, with that, I do have a couple of questions that have come in from the audience. I asked one of them already as we were kind of going through, but I'll do my best to kind of step through them now and try and give a little bit of context on what we have. So the first one was, how would you measure efficiency improvement from the old workflow versus the new automated workflow of today? So I suppose like those benchmarks that you had kind of for the old one, how do you measure that explicitly?
So there's 2 measurements. There's one is just speed and efficiency. So we can move through a file now. I could literally go through a file probably in 5 business days, where the best we used to do was 10. So we cut our time literally in half. But on top of that, it's efficient. We don't make mistakes because we programmed it so that I can't make a mistake. It's a hard stop if we don't answer a question, or if the person who's inputting the information doesn't answer the question correctly or whatever. There's no more mistakes or going back to after a file is done and having to go back to the customer and say, oh, we need this document or that document. So it's cut down on mistakes and just made us more efficient and more profitable because we're more efficient.
Yeah. And I guess maybe a follow-up to that is, like, what kinds of activities are folks able to spend their time doing, which is sort of, generating more revenue rather than kind of like filling around with just, making sure that spread or statuses are updated and that kind of a thing? Is that something that you've noticed has been a huge gain?
Yeah, so before, like, I've been in the business, as I said earlier, 35 years. So we've did virtually no advertising. It was mostly, well, I'm showing my age, my Rolodex. It's afforded me the staff that I have that helps me work on these files. They're now, instead of being so busy and rushed to get somebody off the phone, to develop that rapport with that person. And let's face it, in the business world, you want to feel like you're doing business with people you like and are friendly with you. And it's given them that time to be more personable with the customers. And because this is not just one and done, people make this their business. So they're not just out buying a house, once and paying us for the next 30 years. They're out looking for properties constantly and coming back to us for money over and over again. And we want them to feel like they're family and that they're here. And it's given not just me the ability to keep that relationship. Everybody that works for me and my staff now has extra time to go the extra mile and make them feel like they're the most important borrower that we have in our portfolio.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Being able to focus on the stuff which is, actually requires, human interaction and, some kind of like a personal touch rather than just something which is, a flip of a switch. I did just get a question in which is, I think, kind of a flip side from the question that I asked before, which was, were there any unintended benefits that you got or unexpected benefits? This question is, has the new process resulted in any unintended consequences, and how have you corrected for those?
So we had UATs, which was, I guess, an acronym I learned was just for trying out to make sure that the things work. So we, as we stated earlier, we wrote all these stories, and we had a huge whiteboard that we used, Sick and I used, and we would, use a whiteboard, and we had a spreadsheet figuring out how a file was supposed to flow. But then in reality, sometimes when you actually start inputting it, it doesn't work as it's supposed to. And there was some minor just tweaks to some back end programming to fix those things. But for the most part, other than fixing a code in the back end, things worked really efficiently and worked very well from day one.
Gotcha. I think I got a follow-up question from the previous one, which was there any like percentage in error reduction from the old one to the new workflow? Is that something that you have any concrete data surrounding?
Yeah. So in the mortgage, I don't know how many are familiar with mortgage banking, but we use our money and then we sell off to secondary marketing. So every time I sell a pool of loans at the end of each month, there's a due diligence. Our due diligence used to have 100 items that were needed addressing, which were mistakes or just inefficiencies. And then went from, I think, on average 110. I think we went down to like 25 or 28 open items that were needed. So it was a huge efficiency boost on our production.
Let's see. And I think the next question, I imagine, is earlier when we were talking about when you were kind of thinking about moving on to the next project. Somebody asked, you originally were going for an off-the-shelf product, but you moved over to custom. After this one, for future systems that you're trying to come up with, how do you judge between whether or not you think that it's something that you're going to go custom for or search for a off-the-shelf application? I think that's a good summary of the question.
So we're constantly, to do $3 billion a month, it's probably 10 to 12,000 transactions. So each, like I said, there's 6 different business channels. Each business channel has their own wants and needs. And I sit on the IT committee for what we're doing and our initiatives. And we kind of weigh them out. There's some in the box stuff that is cheap and it's simple and it makes you more efficient. And from this experience, I've learned, depending on the project and what you're trying to accomplish, sometimes cheap can be expensive. So you're better off spending a little extra money or putting in a little extra time, which again is money. But if you put in the right time and effort and custom make what you need, in the long run, it works out better for you. And on that note, we have, after a loan closes, it goes to recording, it becomes public record. Every mortgage banker, I've been in this business 35 years, every mortgage banker, it's called final docs or trailing docs, is a nightmare. And another efficiency that I created in the Appian system is we track which documents haven't come in. And we went from having 350 outstanding documents for old loans down to, I think we're traveling 23 to 28 open documents right now on production, where we know exactly when they're supposed to come in, and if they don't, we're on the phones right away, making us even more efficient on the back end as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah, and definitely. I know from experience that kind of like buying something and then hoping that it's going to in systems, buying systems and hoping that they are going to meet your needs often just has you the exact same model or same interface with your customers as everybody else in your competition, right? Mm-hmm. And so as soon as you're able to have something which is a little bit more custom to your own implementation, that's how you have all of the different differentiators in the market come through. And so let's see, another question. Let's see, I think there's a couple things that are related. Let me see if I can kind of synthesize a little bit. Have you gotten any feedback from customers which you think is either directly attributable to this workflow? And I'm not sure if you actually have any customers or that are actually in the system, if that's what they're asking about, or if it's just, feedback that you have gotten from customers, just noticing like process improvements and that kind of a thing.
So customers are in the system. We have some customers that are tech friendly and savvy and upload their own files. They get a username and password and they upload the files into the system. I have a couple of sales reps that work for me that do it for the customer. So the customers that are tech savvy really like the system. It's easy. You can do it on your phone. As long as you have Wi-Fi and access to the web, they can use it. So they're very happy with it. And and then there's always that group of people that don't want to touch computers. On another note is when I do my when I'm at senior management meetings and after I rolled out the system, I did a demo for senior management. They really were impressed by what we put together. And also, again, those investors that come in and look at our loans and buy them, I showed them the system we use because they said, wow, your deficiencies went from over 100 down to like nothing. What changed? And I showed them our system and they were just blown away by it, that we built a custom system that really made us that much more efficient. So those are 3 different experiences, 3 different sets of eyes that look at the system that were all impressed by it.
Great. I think looking through the other questions, it seems like some of them have already gotten kind of answered in flight of some of the other conversation that we have had. The final one that I have coming in here is, I suppose, what's next? What's the next thing that you have in your sights for other things to automate, other things to build workflows around?
Well, I just finished putting out the rental product, which is a long-term product. So my next thing is I'm actually trying social media campaign for driving in new customers, and I'm going from being more locally in the Northeast to a nationwide lender. So I'll see if social media and marketing can really help me, increase my volume. And what I did was, with my marketing team, we have a quick app that'll bring you right to our landing page so people can take an application right into the portal.
Right.
So we're excited to see how that works.
Right. Well, thank you very much. That's all the questions that we have now. I'll share my screen again momentarily. But yes, again, thank you very much, Jeff, for coming and participating in this. This is definitely very exciting to get to talk to you and to get to talk through this workflow. This is definitely one that we were really proud of, and I think is a great example of the kinds of things that you can build out with Appian. So for everybody who is watching, thank you for attending. We will have this recording that will be available in case you miss it or you want to pass it on to somebody else. Otherwise, we will have more webinars that come down the line. So we're going to continue this series. This is definitely a really fun one. And then every once in a while, we have ones which are a little bit more technical, kind of going in depth. So definitely be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and our Instagram pages and stuff like that for more content like this. But great, thank you again, Jeff. Thank you, Sick, for joining, and thank you everybody for participating and watching.